Is Deebo Samuel's ride with the 49ers nearing the end? Are the Cowboys wasting Dak Prescott's prime years? We discuss the biggest veteran losers following the 2024 NFL Draft on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, but I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com, now focusing on the fallout, just like on this show, of the 2024 NFL Draft.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, yesterday we went through the biggest winners, the veterans that, it's like, yay, they survived the NFL draft, or they got better, or we're expecting great things from them in this next coming season because of what their team has done to help them out. Now, in today's episode, it's the exact opposite. Their team has not so much helped them out in terms of their fantasy value in this upcoming year and in the future for the rest of their career. So let's start with your biggest loser following free agency and the 2024 draft.
Yeah, for me, it's a little bit of a surprise, maybe, because we've been high on him, and he was a big fantasy producer down the stretch last year. But it's the Cowboys' Dak Prescott. Now, the Cowboys draft was bizarre. They didn't draft a running back like everyone expected. They didn't even get interested in the free agents after the draft. They ended up with Ezekiel Elliott. So no rookies of note that they even wanted to go after. They just flew off the board here, and all those undrafted guys were also taken. There was a lot of good options for them, including a kid from Memphis that could have been a fine replacement here for Tony Pollard, Blake Watson. They didn't go after him. Instead, they go after Ezekiel Elliott and bring him back into the mix to be the lead back, spends a year with New England, comes back. They did invest in the offensive line, but I'm not quite sure how ready Tyler Guyton is going to be at offensive tackle to fill in for Tyron Smith. And they looked at guard in the future with Cooper Beebe, with Zach Martin getting a little bit old as well. So some future picks, and we know Jerry Jones has done this before, rebuild the offensive line. He did it. There were Tyron Smith and Martin and one other guy there, Travis Frederick, who retired early, leaving a void at center. So now you've got the same plan in motion, but that doesn't really help Dak Prescott, Michelle. I mean, they also didn't look at the wide receivers. This was a loaded class. They moved on from Michael Gallup, who, by the way, ended up signing a little bit of flyer contract with the Raiders. So they moved on from him. So Jalen Tolbert is now the number 3 behind CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. And really, they didn't look at tight end. I mean, Jake Ferguson's okay, but I think that they were thinking maybe we'd go more in that direction as a pretty good class later for sleepers and stashing. So Dak didn't get much help here. I mean, Ryan Flournoy, we'll see what he does. He's a small school guy, but we've heard about Tolbert, and he hasn't really come through at all on this team. Remember how hyped he was coming in? He's done nothing so far as the third receiver. So I'm a little bit concerned also because what does Ezekiel Elliott signal on top of drafting these guys? Oh boy, we're going to run the ball, and we were disappointed with our running game last year. It was terrible as a power attack, so we want to get this going a little bit, take pressure off Dak. I don't think there's any way the Cowboys want to have that same volume here for Dak. So again, volume with quarterbacks is often key, having a lot of weapons. I mean, the weapons are fine, right? I mean, but you can't be all about CeeDee Lamb and hope Brandon Cooks makes enough plays here. Just a little bit limited on the weapons. Offensive line, I get the direction here, but also not a great pass catcher in the backfield either. So, and if Dak doesn't run enough, and he's kind of put that out of his game since the injury, I think it's tough, Michelle. So I'm not really feeling it with Dak Prescott here in terms of an upgrade. If anything, a downgrade from how high he finished last year.
Yeah, I still am really going to like Dak this year, but this was such a great wide receiver class. I'm shocked they didn't add another wide receiver to go across from CeeDee Lamb. Brandon Cooks is like last year, he was just okay. Like he's a veteran, he's fine, but he's definitely like hitting that age where he probably has maybe one decent season left. Like, this is really a great draft in order for them to keep building weapons around him. Now, CeeDee Lamb might be the 101, right? Like, he's
Yeah.
going to get 170 targets again this year. Jake Ferguson is going to be a solid tight end again because they didn't add anybody. And I
Right.
know they're going to want to run more, but with the offensive line all banged, or like them losing a bunch of pieces of the offensive line, I know they took Tyler Guyton in the first round, but he was my least favorite tackle out of that top group. I was praying the Steelers did not draft him. And he ends up here. Maybe he ends up good, but he's really raw. So I don't know. I don't love the line for Dak Prescott. I don't think it's they
Well,
definitely.
Tyron Smith, keep in mind when he missed games, like it was a brutal time for Dak Prescott. Now that was a younger version when he was in his prime and all that, but still, you got to figure: is Tyler Smith going to hold up if they have to put him at left tackle if Guyton, the other Tyler's not ready? So yeah, so that actually hurts as well, right? If they focus more on the run blocking than pass protection. So I don't know. I don't think they really had Dak in mind, and maybe they're trying to sabotage Dak. I know they can get out of his contract next year. Is Trey Lance on the horizon? Probably not. But let's just think about this. Maybe they're trying to squeeze Dak Prescott, and it's tough. I think they did him kind
But
of
you would
dirty.
think they'd be doing everything possible to make sure they don't lose again in the first stinking playoff game, right?
Right.
Like they didn't do anything this year to help Dak
No.
get over. Yeah, I don't know what the Cowboys' vision is this
Yeah.
offseason. Now, the 49ers, hey, we could have had Brock Purdy as one of the biggest winners yesterday. We didn't mention him, but I mean, he already has so many weapons, right?
Yeah.
Brock Purdy and the 49ers, they have both Ayuk and Deebo still. They didn't trade them. They have George Kittle. They have Christian McCaffrey. And then they use their very first round pick on a wide receiver, Ricky Pearsall. Then in the fourth round, they also take another wide receiver in Jacob Cowing, who had fantastic stats in college, like just a reception machine. So really the only reason he fell to the fourth round is because he's on the smaller side. But when you have all these weapons, defenses aren't going to focus on Jacob Cowing. Like, he can actually do some things in this offense. Now, this, I will say, the biggest loser is Deebo Samuel to me, because I do think they're eyeing the future here. And with them not trading Brandon Ayuk during this draft, I do think they plan to pay him then. And they're able to get out of the Deebo Samuel contract after this year pretty easily. They could do it this year. They would be wasting a little bit of money to not have him on the team. But if they want to trade him this offseason, they can. And then they save a lot of money by not having him on the team next year. And I just also think for this particular year, if he is still on the 49ers with the two additional weapons as well, it was already so hard for him to get targets. He had 89 targets last year. He's only had more than 94 targets in one single season in his career. It was the 2021 huge season with 121 targets. So he doesn't get the consistent targets. They've been running the ball with him less and less because, he's also had trouble staying healthy. And defenses started to catch on to that. It worked for a while. It's not working anymore. So they started to go away from running Deebo all the time. Now he's still scoring rushing touchdowns, which is great. But I think with them adding Ricky Pearsall in the first round, that's also less touches. Also, I think a big part of them adding Pearsall is he's such a good separator and good route runner. That's something Deebo really, really struggles with. He has, the team manufactures touches for him. He's great once you get the ball in his hands, but he's not good at getting open. And that really hurt them in the Super Bowl with Deebo not being able to get open on his own. So I do think the team's probably going to move on from him sooner rather than later. And even if he is still on the 49ers this year, I just don't see him getting all that many touches. So I'm going to be down on Deebo in fantasy this year.
Yeah, 100% completely agree with you. And I'll add some more to this to throw some more logs under the fire here. Remember what the team said about Juwan Jennings? They really like him and they want to keep him around. So that's another guy that they've talked about being a bigger factor at some point as the third receiver. So there's something to look at there. The other point is Kyle Shanahan cannot quit drafting offensive skill players. Two more wide receivers. And they also got another running back in Isaac Guerendo who's got some speed. And so you add him to what you have in Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey. Deebo already was cut off, right, from those key McCaffrey touches in the short passing game, those rushing attempts that he used to get pre-McCaffrey. He was already cut off. Now we add another running back who's actually very fast. He was the fastest running back at the combine, Guerendo. So he's got speed in the open field, some decent hands as a change of pace. So Samuel's cut off of that again. You have Jennings, you have Pearsall, you've got Ayuk, it's just a crowd, and George Kittle. I mean, it's just too many people here for Deebo to produce, and you're spot on with the targets from last year. There's no way Samuel's seeing a uptick in that work, and that's not going to make us happy in fantasy.
Yeah, and you made a great point about them drafting Garendo. It doesn't you're not going to be like petrified of a fourth round running back for a wide receiver, but at the same time, he might take his carries, right? Because it's not just that Isaac Garendo is fast; he is also big. He's 221 pounds, running a 4.33. Like he's like a DK Metcalf back there running with that speed. So they're definitely going to utilize him in that change of pace role. I think more than Deebo again. So just fewer touches for Deebo. I think Deebo's a great, fantastic player with the ball in his hands. But unfortunately, I just don't
He's had
think
his
there's
best
going to be
run, I
enough
think.
touches.
This is it. I think it's
Yeah.
all downhill from here in fantasy, unfortunately. So he's one of those guys we can lament because he was special for a little while, but only if he could have stayed on the field and healthier, he could have had a real great career. But that's the way it is. And we will look at some other players. Actually, we will give it away that there are two wide receivers. So we'll get into two more wide receivers in our next segment as the next wave of losers. Then we'll finish it up with two more running backs here on today's show. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships in reality or fantasy football is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to the U.S. customers.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is also brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. It's baseball season. If you live in a city with a baseball team that you like to go to, don't stress about buying tickets early. You can literally just decide that day, hey, I want to go to a baseball game today. Jump on the Game Time app. It's going to be so easy, so quick. You're going to get the best prices guaranteed, and it's going to be so easy for you. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps and you're set, and tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that code is LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Who is your second biggest loser in terms of veteran players after the NFL draft?
Yes, Michelle, it's pretty easy for me, and he should be on every list. And this is buyer beware, drafter beware. It's DJ Moore of the Bears. I mean, this was not a great draft for DJ Moore. It was a great draft for Caleb Williams. He was number one overall. He's going to get paid as the number one pick. It was a great draft for Rome Odunze. He's now headed to Chicago. So these two guys were on the same flight, and going to the draft, they're on the same flight out of the draft. And these are the two guys that have arrived. And don't forget, they also made a deal for Keenan Allen. So last year, DJ Moore was sitting pretty. It was him and Justin Fields playing pitch and catch every game. He had 136 targets. Cole Kmet was the next best guy. You had Darnell Mooney, big drop off at wide receiver. Not so fast anymore with DJ Moore. He's got a lot of competition for targets. They have Cole Kmet still, and they added Gerald Everett behind him at tight end. Now you got to worry about Keenan Allen. You got to worry about Rome Odunze. That's a lot of targets that are going to be cut into. And we know Keenan Allen is a target monster with the Chargers. So he's going to swallow a lot of those things in the slot that DJ Moore might have seen working from outside to inside. And now you've got Udinze in the mix on the outside, who's got a big body, a little bit of Devontae Adams in his style here. DJ Moore's a little bit smaller. He's a speed, quick receiver, right? But now you got two guys that are kind of in that big body possession mode. And you have a younger quarterback, and we don't know what the chemistry is going to be. I mean, Fields and Moore had great chemistry. Remember that game against the Commanders on Thursday night? They just went nuts together. Moore was getting open all over the field. Now, these targets are going to be spread around. There's no way those targets remain. I also know Shane Waldron has taken over, so probably not going to feed one guy. Remember, Waldron came from Seattle, where they distributed the ball pretty evenly, and Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf were there as well. So, yeah, I don't see DJ Moore getting the targets. I'm not saying that he's going to be total bust because he's still the alpha receiver. Keenan Allen is ancient. You know that Rome Odunze is a rookie. He's going to still be the alpha. But if you're expecting the return that he's going to be, okay, he's got Caleb Williams. We're all good. Upgrade from Justin Fields, locking in as wide receiver 1. I don't know. I think his upside and ceiling might be capped at wide receiver 2 because of Allen and Odunze.
Yeah, he's going to have to be so super efficient, like hyper efficient with his
Yeah,
targets.
big
Now,
play.
he can be. He is that
Yeah.
type of player that can be. But yeah, there's too many targets to go around. It kind of hurts everybody. I do love this landing spot for Rome Odunze for his career. Don't
Yeah.
love it for this season because it comes down to all three of these guys are really, really good wide receivers, and Keenan
Somebody needs to
Allen,
get hurt, I
DJ
think. Yeah.
Moore, and Odunze. Yeah, and unless there's an injury, it's going to be really hard for all three of them to consistently put up fantasy points. So you're right. Like, I think in terms of like him being happy playing, this is probably going to be like, this is a win for him. Like, he has the best quarterback he's ever had, the best playmakers around him. Everything should be very easy. But in terms of his actual like box score production, probably not going to be the best of his career. Now, my big loser, this has been just a really rough offseason for him. It's Rashee Rice, second-year wide receiver for the Chiefs. At the end of last year, it was feeling really good. Like, if you had him in a dynasty or keeper league, you were like, man, I have a really good player. But then the Chiefs go on and add Marquise Hollywood Brown, and that's no big deal, right? They needed other players. But then they also moved up in the first round to take Xavier Worthy. And then also we have to consider his legal trouble, right? So we don't know if he's going to be suspended for any games. We do know they added two really good weapons. Xavier Worthy is a really, really good weapon, and they traded up to get him. And then Hollywood Brown, has not had fewer than 100 targets in any of the last 4 seasons. Doesn't mean he's going to have 100 targets this year, but he's going to be targeted. And last year, it was legit Rashee Rice at wide receiver and pretty much no one else there for the Chiefs. So it was only Kelsey and Rice that had over a 9% team target rate last year. 9% is absolutely nothing. It was Kelsey with 121 targets, Rice with 102, and then all the way down Justin Watson at 53. Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy are going to get more targets than that for sure, as long as they're healthy. And then also Rashee Rice needs a lot of targets to perform for fantasy. His air yards per target was down at 4.8 yards. Air yards per target. That's nearly 3 yards per target fewer than any other wide receiver with 100 plus targets last year. It went Rashee Rice at 4.8 to Adam Thielen, second lowest, to 7.5 air yards per target. Like, that's a massive, massive gap. And even if you move it down to 50 plus targets last year, Rashee Rice is still the lowest at 4.8, with Rondale Moore second at 5.2, Wan'Dale Robinson third at 5.3. Like, those are not players that you want to take unless they're going to get 140 plus targets. That's what we were hoping for with Rashee Rice going into his second year. But after the offseason that he has had, I don't see that even coming close to happening.
Yeah, and Rashee Rice was basically a replacement as a big slot for Juju Smith-Schuster, who had good fantasy relevance in the 1 year he was with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. So you saw that and kind of translated to Rashee Rice, and it took a few developments to happen. Kadarius Toney had to fall flat on his face. Sky Moore had to totally bust out and just be a bad pick, and Justin Watson had to just be limited to a deep threat, and that's all that happened last year. Now, while unfortunately, Rashee Rice decided to go at high speeds at the wrong time, you had two guys that can actually run on the field that are much faster than him join the Chiefs. I mean, Hollywood Brown, you've seen some work with him in practice. He is flying. He's got that speed that we knew that he had with the Ravens and getting deep for Lamar Jackson. Now you have Xavier Worthy, the fastest player all time at any position at the combine. So they've got some guys that can stretch the field, and Patrick Mahomes' eyes are going to light up, and he's not going to just say, oh, I'm going to throw to the big slot. That's all I have open because no one else is reliable. Keep that in mind. That's going to be something we want to monitor as well. It turned out that after Travis Kelce, Mahomes could only basically trust Rashee Rice and a little bit of Justin Watson, like sprinkled in, right? Even he stopped trusting Marquez Valdez-Scantling at one point. Like, no, I'm not throwing here. I'm just going Kelce Rice. That's not going to happen this year. I think he's going to develop some trust with Hollywood Brown. It's going to happen with Worthy. They're going to work together a lot. So,
You have to
yeah, and
remember
maybe,
Kelce for like what
yeah,
a big chunk of time there was dealing with an injury, wasn't getting as
yeah,
many targets. Like if he I mean, the playoff Kelce, if he's back to that, then there's already fewer. Like a lot like with Deebo Samuel, they kind of had a manufacturer touchers for Rashee
right.
Rice, and they were doing that, and that was great for fantasy. But I don't think they're going to stress themselves out about manufacturing 8 touches a game for Rashee Rice, like
No,
maybe a
I don't see
couple a
it.
game. Yeah, I don't see it. I'm kind of like completely out on Rice unless he starts dropping
And he could get
significantly.
suspended on top of all this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's clear. I mean, Zay Flowers, we heard nothing's going to happen there, but we heard Roger Goodell. They're investigating. They're going to find out something. So I would expect there's some discipline here. I mean, it was such a viral thing that happened that the NFL wants to send a message. We're not street racing with our guys and putting
Yeah.
other people in danger, especially high profile Dallas. Everything about that was bad for Rashee Rice. So continues here, unfortunately, with the draft.
Yeah. We're going to hear from one more of our sponsors and then get to our final 2 losers. They're both veteran running backs, unfortunately. I did not see them losing after the draft, but the NFL loves to just throw wrenches at us. So we'll get to that in just a moment. I've been told I'm a competitive person by many, many, many people, and I agree. I definitely, definitely am. I do have a very strong competitive side. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly, but now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get into the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, Vinny, I don't know if I agree with you on this loser. I agreed with you with your first 2. Give me your third loser.
Yes, it's a guy that's been very productive in fantasy. I mean, he was a big touchdown scorer 3 years ago. He's had 2 solid RB2 finishes the back-to-back years here. The only thing that has been hurting him is his injuries. He can't stay on the field. He always has to miss a few games, and he's getting up there. It is James Conner of the Cardinals. Now, Conner's had a good run. I mean, we didn't know what we're going to expect. I mean, he fought cancer, and then he got on the field for his team there that was right in his backyard, and he was very productive with the Steelers. He saved them from that Le'Veon Bell disaster, so good for him. And he's been a good fantasy running back. I mean, sneakily, if you look back over the last 5-6 years, this has been one of the most reliable fantasy backs. But I was surprised when the Cardinals used a early pick at running back on Trey Benson. They also know that James Conner misses time. They also know it happened last year. They were stuck with Imari DeMarcado and some of these other guys that they had to plug in there. They did to pick up Michael Carter, so they have him. He's the former Jet that one time had some work there. But what worries me about Trey Benson behind James Conner, he can do a lot of the same things well, the power running and finish in the red zone. And he's a very productive back from Florida State. I mean, it was weird. He didn't to go off in 100-yard games, but he was a steady back that you had that has a little bit of the good between the tackles juice. And that's kind of where James Conner is. I know he did show that he could receive both in Pittsburgh and in Arizona, but that's not necessarily a strength. So this just worries me when a team that you don't expect uses a pick like this on a running back. I think that you're concerned. And keep in mind, it's Drew Petzing. He came from the Browns. So I think he's looking for, I'm not comparing this player, but he's looking for a Nick Chubb type, A guy that can run pound between the tackles, occasionally though break like 20 to 30-yard runs. I don't think James Conner can do that anymore. I think he's kind of debilitated a little bit in terms of the wear and tear, the volume, the injuries he's had. I don't think he has that burst. So I think that's what they were looking for, to get those big runs downfield playing off Kyler Murray. So again, when I see a team do this, then I know they have concerns, and then I'm also concerned about a guy's workload. So I'm just going to say Connor durability issues. If Benson comes in there, does a bang up job, they're not going to go back. I mean, he's also a free agent in 2025, so they could be ready to turn the page. And if Benson gives them any hint of being better and more explosive, I think that's where they're going to go. And all the good vibes and reliability of James Conner in RB2, out the window.
Yeah, I think the reason why I'm not considering him a loser is because I think he only had one more year left in him anyways, at least with the Cardinals, at least having high fantasy production. Like I was just considering a one more year guy anyways. I mean, it's very, very rare for a third round running back to come in and steal a veteran's job. It's even rare. Like we saw it with Zach Charbonnet last year. The Seahawks use a second rounder, and still it's all Kenneth Walker until he gets hurt. I think that's the thing with the Cardinals. They know Connor does get hurt. They need some depth. So, and also looking towards the future.
Like that's my biggest concern. He's going to get hurt.
Yeah. Trey Benson will be for the future, but also like with Kyler Murray, I think he really, really trusts James Conner. Connor's good in pass protection. Connor's a very trustworthy pass catcher. I still think this is James Conner's job until, like you said, until he gets hurt. And maybe the difference now is maybe he doesn't get it back. I didn't love Trey Benson as a prospect, so I think he'd get it back. But I mean, it's definitely not a win. Like you can't call James Conner a winner, but it's kind of, he's
hard to draft, I think, as an RB2 at this point. I think it's very challenging if there's some other people on the table, right? I mean, we've talked about some guys with upside, Joe Mixon with the Texans, Zach Moss, you mentioned the Bengals. I mean, there's a lot more maybe appealing situations you might consider, even like a Devin Singletary.
I was just going to ask you, would you rather Devin Singletary with the Giants where he's going to get a lot of touches, or James Conner with the Cardinals?
Yeah, I mean, James Conner, again, scares me a little bit. The other thing that's going to factor in is Kyler Murray is healthy for the whole year. So that's some rushing yards that are going to go away and some rushing touchdowns. I just think they're going to transition a little bit more. And you also have Marvin Harrison Jr. when they didn't have a lot at wide receiver last year. So they'll probably throw a little bit more this season.
Don't you think them being on the field, though, and not always going 3 and out
without
Kyler
it's true.
Murray?
I just don't know if I can count on Connor getting those high leverage touches that we're used to, like the scoring. Like they could pop in Benson there to run in. So
Connor is one of the best goal line running backs in the league.
Yeah, but I just think he's breaking down. I think he's breaking down, and I think you said maybe one more year. Let's hope we can squeeze some of this year out of James Conner, but I think it's probably over. But I think your guy, I'm going to disagree with your guy a little bit as well, but I'll let you reveal him.
Well, the reason why I'm putting Josh Jacobs as a big loser is because of how much he was a winner to start this free agency. I mean, right away, he joins the Packers, and the Packers release Aaron Jones. And you're like, oh my goodness, Josh Jacobs is the biggest winner. It's where he went from like so high to now like, so like it would have been impossible not to have him ranked as a top 10 running back when that news hit, right? You're like, oh my goodness, going to a good offense. He has this entire backfield to himself because AJ Dillon was expected to be gone as well. But then they re-sign AJ Dillon. And you're like, man, that's gross because like they just still give AJ Dillon touches. And you're like, why? So even when Aaron Jones, I know he dealt with injuries, so that's why AJ Dillon got more touches than he should have last year. But even when both were on the field healthy, they still just give AJ Dillon too many touches. And then they use a mid-third round pick on a running back and Marshawn Lloyd, who I really like as a prospect. And I think he's a good change of pace back. So another guy that's going to take touches. And Josh Jacobs is one of those, like, he needs the volume. He's a volume running back. And I do think he clearly leads this backfield. And I do think he gets the goal line touches. But it's just AJ Dillon's also going to get goal line touches. Now you have Marshawn Lloyd, who's going to get some touches and snaps. It went from just he's an easy top 10 running back rank to now low end RB2. I'm feeling him in that case.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe mid RB2, but he was like maybe possibly a top 5 running back at one point this offseason.
Yeah, I think I would still put him in an RB1 because, again, keep in mind, this was the rushing and scrimmage leader. Now, I'm not going to be as high on him, but I also look at let's look at it from this perspective of the Packers. AJ Dillon is not a pass catcher, right? So if there was a situation where they would have to replace Josh Jacobs, they can't just put AJ Dillon out there. I mean, he's had some receiving success, but I think they needed some change of pace. They know what AJ Dillon is. He's a bit of a plotter, a power back, slower type back. So they needed a little change of pace. And I also think the Packers are that team that if they see a guy dropping that has a lot of talent, they're going to jump on him. And it's Matt LaFleur. It's kind of like Kyle Shanahan. They can't quit looking at offensive skill players. You know how many receivers he's drafted. So he's always going to be looking for that type of player. Now, yeah, it's not great for Josh Jacobs because, again, Lloyd could step in there and be special. I think to me, where he does qualify as a loser, Michelle, is that Lloyd is very talented. And that's like, why did you draft such a talented back? Why couldn't it have been a later round pick? Like, just even if it was like a Ray Davis type, right?
Yeah.
Behind AJ Dillon, I'm okay with it. But it's like, oh no, here's a guy that has some receiving skills. He can run fast. So you're right. It's a little bit worrisome, right? Just like we've seen with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. Are they going to cut into the lead back touches too many times? So I think that's the perspective that I would come with. But let's hope. Let's hope Jacob
We
stays on
also
the
know
field.
Josh Jacobs doesn't care about
Yeah,
getting
he's not
so
a
many
he's a
touches. He's
team guy,
actually said
right?
before he wants to split a backfield. Like
Yeah.
he wanted that with the
Long-term
Raiders. He
payment.
doesn't
That's
want
why.
he wants to save his body, and he's the
He's getting
most
paid, so why not, right?
he
I mean, you're
legitimately
presenting.
hates fantasy football. Like he hates
Yeah,
people who play fantasy football. He loves to mess with them. He hates it. He does not care about his numbers in fantasy football. So that also he might be like, yeah, bring it on. Bring in Dylan in here,
yeah,
bring in Lloyd. I'll
yeah.
take my
No,
money.
that's not the attitude to move on. Come on.
It's
You want to
that
touch the ball
that
30.
is Josh Jacobs' attitude, though.
He's a good team player. That's why they signed him. That's why they're
Okay.
doing it. He's a team player. He's going to be good in the locker room, whatever, and help Jordan Love. So, yeah, that I get it. They're trying to win a Super Bowl too. So,
Yeah.
but for fantasy, again, this is all fantasy. I mean, some of these guys are going to be really good in reality and help their team win. But for fantasy, yeah, these guys we're looking for numbers, and I don't know if the numbers are going to improve with any of these guys.
Yep. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, Vinny and I will be back tomorrow to give you some gems from the later rounds in the 2024 NFL draft. Guys that we think could actually be fantasy relevant to start their career. It will be a really fun episode. Don't miss it, y'all. Bye.